Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on semester-long project management, brought to you by the Academic Resource Center at Georgetown University. Today, we're going to be discussing strategies for developing a plan for some sort of project that you want to be working on consistently throughout the next semester. Often when students are considering projects that require long-term planning, they either refer to some sort of major project or else something that isn't academic related and is more personal in nature. So a lot of times this topic comes up when working on a schedule for a master's thesis, a dissertation, a capstone project. We can also apply these same techniques to looking at job applications, internship applications, or graduate school applications. Today, we're going to be using examples for a master's thesis as well as job applications. But again, a lot of the principles can be applied to these as well as many other projects. We have to start before we can look at what we're doing step by step by looking at the semester as a whole. You want to consider the project and go as far in the future as you can to figure out what your eventual endpoint is. In terms of looking at a semester plan, we are considering a rough plan for February through May. So the beginning step is determining what you want to have accomplished by the end of May. With this goal for what it is you need to have accomplished by the end of May, we want to avoid being vague. When you're considering this, you want something concrete that you can actually look at and define in clear terms instead of a broad concept. What that means also is that you want it to be realistic and within your control. The example is that we're going to look at in a moment is if you're applying for a job, obviously you want to be employed when you graduate from Georgetown. But knowing that that is not within your control, you want to figure out what concrete actions that you can measure and that are realistic you will have taken throughout the semester and where you will be in terms of concrete steps by the end of May. You may have heard of the term before, SMART goals. SMART is an acronym that is used in coming up with goals that can help you make concrete steps forward. It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. This means that you aren't being broad and vague. You are being very clear and defining very specifically what tasks you will have accomplished. So we're going to take some look at our examples. Our first example that we'll be looking at throughout this presentation is if you need to write a master's thesis. Before we can figure out a plan, we need to assess where you are now and what you need to achieve. So for this hypothetical master's thesis, where am I now? We're saying that I am entering the semester having completed an abstract and a bibliography, and that I have a detailed outline. So what do I need to have achieved by the end of May? I need to finish my thesis. So with this example, we're approaching it in that I need to have completely written my thesis by the end of the semester. And at this point, I'm ready to sit down and write, but I haven't started that writing. How do we turn that process of finishing a thesis into concrete steps? What this means is that I need to have 100 pages written and completed. So that is my concrete task for the semester, to write 100 pages. Job applications may seem a little more abstract. Where am I now? At the beginning of the semester, I have not started applying for jobs. I do not have a job. and I need one for when I graduate. So what is it that I need to have achieved? I need that job. What do we want that to look like in concrete terms? This is going to vary according to the individual needs of whoever is coming up with this plan. But if I want to be applying for as much as possible while also balancing what I actually want to do in the workplace, I'm going to tell myself that I should have submitted applications for about 50 jobs. The 100 pages for a master's thesis is defined by the department, so that's more set. This is going to be a more flexible number, but that's the range I'm aiming for. I should have submitted applications for at least 50 jobs by the end of May. Now that we have these goals for the semester, the next step is to break them into units month by month. After having figured out what you need to achieve by the end of the semester, you want to determine what you need to achieve by the end of each month. So we're asking similar questions, but we're scaling it down. What concrete content do you need to produce each month? And what steps do you need to take in order to produce that content? Again, we're trying to be specific and measurable in developing our goals. It's not about what we need to do in terms of the work, but what do we need to develop in terms of the product? We have here our monthly goals for our 100-page master's thesis. For this, we're starting at the end with May. May, which is at the bottom of this slide, we know we need to have 100 pages submitted. Knowing that that's my end goal in figuring out this monthly plan, I then thought about where do I need to be in April in order to have 100 pages in May. That means that in April, I need to be able to focus on revising the written content. In thinking about revising content for a thesis of this scope, I am aware of the fact that when I'm editing a paper, typically I will read through a draft that I already have and find areas that need more development. So my approach based on my writing style isn't going to be to write 100 pages and then revise 100 pages. I am planning to write maybe 80 pages, and then after that, I will plan on locating areas that need more and maybe writing an additional 20 pages based on what I need. So May, we know what we need. April, we're going to try to revise the written content and then write those 20 pages. So that kind of makes it very clear what I will be doing in February and March. February, I'm going to try to write 40 pages. March, I'm going to try to write 40 pages. So we have it in a big month by month scope. Job applications, this process looks a little different. For job applications, I'm going to start with what I need to do now in February, because for the thesis writing, a lot of pressure comes on the end of the process, finishing things up, submitting things on time. For job applications, there's more pressure on getting things started because once you're in a groove and you have your systems in place, it's easy to keep those systems going. So I have a lot of smaller tasks that I need to do to get started with this process, and I want to make sure I get through all of those tasks in February. In particular, I want to meet with the Career Center, edit my resume and cover letter, and set up job alerts so that websites will give me emails when roles are posted that suit my needs. And then based on that, knowing that I have this goal of applying to about 50 jobs, I just know March apply to 20, April apply to 20, May apply to 20. This it's going to be harder to quantify, but what I can tell from this process is that this really puts pressure on February to do all of this minutia and to make sure I get it done soon so that I can start this process. After we've looked at our goals from a month to month basis, we want to determine our smallest units of progress. How small can we make our goals? We want to find a balance between working as frequently as possible in order to make progress on your goals while also spacing out work blocks so that they're realistic. One thing that may not work for you is working towards a long-term goal every single day because you may have other obligations and you may not have time every day. If you can't make that work, telling yourself that that's what you're going to do can't last throughout the semester. Likewise, if you lose focus more easily and you tell yourself you're only going to work on it once a week and that's not enough to maintain your interest, that's also not realistic. So you need to look at your own particular schedule when considering daily goals versus weekly goals. You also want to consider how you work best in considering whether you want to schedule long work blocks or short work sessions. You can work on these goals over a long period of time by scheduling 1 or 2 very significant work blocks during the week. But if you are a procrastinator and that's something you're less likely to spend time on, it's going to be more productive to schedule these shorter blocks. Sometimes we don't sit down and work on a long-term project for 30 minutes once a week because we feel like that's not enough time. But 30 minutes once a week that you actually commit to something is superior to a 3-hour planned block that then you cancel because you can't commit to it. This is what I'm keeping in mind in moving into determining weekly goals for this master's thesis for February. Again, this is for a master's student, so I'm approaching this as a graduate student schedule where a significant amount of time should be available during the day to work on this, while also naming that there are other responsibilities, teaching responsibilities that the student may have as well. So with that in mind, February is fairly straightforward. We need 40 pages throughout the month, so we're going to research and draft 10 pages a week. Week 1, 10, week 2, 10, week 3, 10, and so on. The same routine are going to be our goal for March. A little more complicated is going to be April. So skipping March, I went ahead and broke down the weekly goals for April, knowing that at the end, we want to have 100 revised pages, but we also need to write 20 pages. So how I've approached this is week 1, we're going to start by reading through 80 pages across the week, identifying major revisions that need to be made, and also identify sections that need more content. So essentially, we're putting pressure on that first week to read through everything so that we can develop a plan for how to use the next 2 weeks. That means that the second week, we're going to put focus on working on adding more content where needed. So we want to write a minimum of 10 pages, which should be routine at this point. It's hard to be specific with how many pages I'll need at that point because we're looking several months into the future, but that's where we're going to try to get to 20 pages, but at least 10. That third week, we're going to finish writing, and then we're going to revise at least 20 pages of this content. And then that last week is revising 60 pages. It's helpful to sit down and figure out an in-depth plan for something so far in the future because it helps you see if this is a realistic plan or not. Looking at this as goals for April, this actually feels a little ambitious to me. And so that makes me want to try to write more than 40 pages a month for February and March. If I can write more sooner, I think I'll feel better about April, but I'm not committing to that. It's helpful though to assess every month in order to see where I need to be. So the job application process, this I structured more for an undergraduate who has a lot of daily classes and doesn't necessarily have as many big blocks of time. Here would be my weekly goals for February. The first week, I want to make an appointment with the Career Center and I want to look over my resume and my cover letter. I don't necessarily have a clear sense of what I am going to talk to the Career Center about, but I think it's a good starting point to introduce external accountability sources into this routine. I think it will inspire me and also give me some tips to make this a more real process. Hopefully that second week, I'll be able to meet with the Career Center. And then based on any comments they have, I want to revise my resume and cover letter. Week 3, I want to identify 3 to 5 websites with relevant positions and create job alerts. So basically, I want to know where I'm primarily going to be looking to find and locate jobs I want to apply to. And I'm hoping by creating job alerts now, it will make my life easier in the future. And then week 4, I will scan jobs for the last week and create a list of roles to apply for during the next week. So that fourth step is going to help me ease into the actual job application process. With the thesis approach, since I have more time and my class schedule has to a certain degree incorporated the fact that I need to write this into it, I am trying to do more per week. With the job application process, there is no time in this for my schedule. So I'm taking the approach of having smaller goals that I can commit to. The first week, for example, making an appointment with the Career Center, that feels like a little thing. Can I do more than that? But it's better to start small and actually do it than to plan more than I can actually manage, especially when the beginning. It's most difficult to get started with this process. Then we're moving into our weekly goals for March. With the job application process, this is a lot more straightforward. Week 1, apply to jobs of interest posted in the last week and scan job alerts for incoming jobs. And then my goals for weeks 2, 3, and 4 are the same. Scan job alerts each day and apply for about 5 jobs by the end of the week. Same the next week and the week after. So the idea here is that hopefully I can develop a routine that once I've done all the heavy lifting can become really automatic. Once you know what your weekly goals are going to be, you need to schedule regular times to work towards these goals. You don't want to assume that they're going to happen. They need to work into your schedule. One thing to start with is to determine how you're tracking your goals. Do you want to use a virtual planner to keep track of this or a physical planner? Are you adding these work blocks or work sessions to your Google Calendar so that you get alerts? Are you writing Post-it notes and leaving them on your computer so that you remember to show up somewhere? You want to make sure that you have a way to hold yourself accountable to actually commit to these working sessions. Determine your concrete details, such as where and when your goal session will occur before it's actually time to work on it. This is a good tip for any study sessions, but if you can take the pressure off of the day you need to do that work session, if you can take pressure off of it by predetermining when and where you will be and visualizing where it will be, it will make it easier to actually do it. Often when there's something without an immediate deadline, we find it quite easy to talk ourselves out of completing a task. It's even as simple as waking up one morning, thinking about going to the library, but then you realize you're hungry, so you need to eat breakfast, and then you eat breakfast and it starts raining, and then it's like 2 hours have passed, so you don't go to the library. If you can plan the night before when you're eating, when you're leaving, when you're getting there, and commit to that, it'll prevent that sort of procrastination from happening as much. You should also consider inviting a colleague or friend who may have similar goals to one of your working sessions. This is especially true for a graduate program. Maybe you have someone who also is working on a thesis, or for a job application, maybe you have someone who's applying for jobs. If you can plan on having a weekly session with another person to work on this, that will help create a sense of accountability and could be very useful in actually getting you to be somewhere once a week to work towards this. You could also consider using a project management tool such as a Gantt chart just to help develop your plans. So this is what a Gantt chart looks like. This is basically a project management tool that, again, helps you map out step-by-step goals. This particular Gantt chart example is breaking down working on a thesis. And this Gantt chart template was made in Excel. I didn't need to make it. Excel and Google Sheets have pre-made templates that you can use and then just fill in your own content. If you're interested in using a tool like this, take a look at our webinar on our YouTube page called Keeping Track of Assignments with Google Sheets and Excel. We go over how to find these templates in both of those programs. Very easy and very good way to keep track of assignments. With my 2 example projects, what do my work blocks look like? So here are my work blocks for the job applications. Again, here I'm trying to do a little bit each day instead of doing more fewer times a week. So what I'm hoping is that Monday through Friday during lunch, I'm going to check job alerts and add any of interest to my application list. I want to do this during lunch because that is a time when I have a regular placeholder, even though my schedule looks very different day to day. I always eat lunch, and then I'm making my tasks on these days minimal, just checking job alerts and noting ones that I might be interested in. This is going to keep me in the habit of being aware of this, but this is realistic. All I have to do is check my emails essentially and scan them and write down tasks I want to look at later. Friday after lunch is when I'll be finished with classes and I want to ease into work a little bit more, knowing that I'm also going to be really tired because it's Friday after lunch. So I'm going to look through the jobs of interest in more detail. That means throughout the week, I'm just writing down jobs that I might be interested in. Friday, I'm going to look through all of those, look over them, get a sense of how I actually feel about them. It's also helpful to look at jobs next to each other, look at jobs next to each other to get a sense of which ones are more appropriate for me than others. And then I'm going to create an application task list for the next day. So what's my plan for Saturday when I'm actually applying? And then Saturday from 10 a.m. until lunch, I'm going to submit applications for at least 5 jobs. I've chosen this block because I can kind of wake up and start doing it, and I don't have a hard stop time because I don't know how many jobs I'll want to apply for. I might have 0 that week. I might have 15 that week. It's hard to say. My thesis work blocks are going to look very different. For this, I have significant free time Monday and Wednesday evening, and then Tuesday and Thursday morning. I personally am a morning worker. I can do better thinking in the morning. evening, very difficult for me to work and difficult for me to focus, but unfortunately, I have to work in the evening if I'm working on a master's thesis. So I'm trying to do the prep work in the evening. My goal for Monday and Wednesday evenings from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. is to look through my research and to pull quotes for my next writing session. So Monday night, I'll be pulling quotes and looking through research for my Tuesday writing session. Tuesday and Thursday from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m., I'm going to try to draft 2 to 3 pages. I'm keeping the writing amount vague because I don't know how much I'll be able to write every day, but I know that I need to get 2 to 3 pages done per session in order to stay on this schedule. Saturday, I will also from 9 a.m. to 12 write 2 to 3 pages. And then Saturday in the afternoon, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., I'm going to finish weekly writing. That's basically me acknowledging the fact that I might not have gotten through 10 pages. And that's my finish everything up block because I do need to get through those 10 pages. I'm also in that after lunch period on Saturday going to develop an in-depth outline for the next 10 pages. Again, I'm kind of tired in the afternoon, so I'm going to use that time as best as I can to plan for the next week so that I can be more efficient when I actually have energy to write. When you're creating these work blocks for yourself, a few things to consider. One is to plan to work on this project at times when you will not prioritize another assignment. This is very important. There's a reason that both of these major assignments fell on Saturdays, or depend on Saturdays, I should say, to get the most of their work done. That's because typically students aren't as likely to have deadlines on Sunday, which means you're less likely to cancel working on these long-term assignments because something else is looming. One reason we put off a lot of long-term assignments is because we work on the deadline motivated tasks first, and then we say, at the end, when I'm finished, I'll work on this long-term thing, but we've used up the best of our energy by that point. So then we do not work on it and we just put it off. So it's best if you can start by working on this long-term project, even if it's just a little bit, and if you can plan on working at it at a time when you won't have another deadline immediately due. Even so, you may have another assignment to prioritize. If you do have another assignment with a deadline that's more important, try to spend at least 20 or 30 minutes on your project. For example, let's say Saturday, I planned on working from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m. on my thesis, and then again from 2 p.m. until 5 p.m. But I have a 20-page paper due on Monday, and I can't work on this. You should still try to work for at least 20 to 30 minutes because that will keep you connected to your work routine and connected to this schedule. Once you cancel the first time, it becomes easier to cancel the second time and so on. So again, those really little bits of progress will keep you engaged and keep you moving forward. End each working session by developing a plan for what you will do during the next session. So know when you are leaving a writing session, what's my next steps? What am I doing next? When will I be studying next or working on this? You should always be aware, at least, of the next time you're going to sit down and work on this project. At most, maybe developing an outline or knowing the specifics of what tasks you need to do. And likewise, begin each project session by looking at the plan that you developed during your last session. So you may not waste as much time getting started because you used the end of your last session to record what it is you need to do during this session. Our next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, February 6th from 4 to 4:30 p.m. on note-taking with Notion, going over how to use Notion, which is a very complex and beautiful web program for taking notes and setting up different templates. So join us for that. If not, feel free to add any questions to the chat, either about project management or about any of the other webinars I mentioned. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining today and have a great afternoon.